All right, welcome to Rewatch or Return, the podcast where we put movies through the ultimate test across 10 universal categories to decide, does it call for a definite rewatch, a definite trip to the return bin, or does our subjectivity cause it to fall somewhere in between? This year. This week's movie is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Jumping right into fast forward facts. Let's warm up the VHS machine and head back to 1987 when John Hughes shifted gears from teen angst to adult holiday chaos with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, his first major comedy aimed squarely at grown-ups. What resulted is one of the most beloved Thanksgiving movies ever made, equally parts hilarious misadventure and gut-punch heart. The film stars Steve Martin as Neil Page, an uptight, exhausted marketing executive just trying to get home for Thanksgiving, and John Candy as Dale Griffith, a talkative, overly cheerful shower curtain ring salesman who's equal parts lovable and infuriating. Together, they endure a cross-country odyssey featuring canceled flights, burning rental cars, exploding tempers, and one unforgettable pillow misunderstanding. This was John Hughes at his peak, writing the script in just 3 days and directing with his trademark balance of comedy and soul. The film cost about $15 million to make and became a box office hit, but its staying power comes from its emotional center, especially in that final twist revealing Dell's heartbreaking secret. Behind the scenes, the movie was almost much longer. Hughes' original cut ran nearly 3 hours, containing an entire sequence that never made it into the theaters, including extended hotel scenes, more rental car disasters, and additional gags on the train. Most of this footage is still missing today, making it the holy grail for Hughes fans. One of the film's most iconic moments, Steve Martin unloading a legendary 18 F-bomb rant at the rental car counter, was improvised and pushed the movie right into an R rating. Hughes insisted on keeping it because the meltdown was too perfect, and honestly, he was right. The classic "those aren't pillows" scene, Candy and Martin struggled to get through it without breaking, reportedly ruining multiple takes because the two couldn't stop laughing. Their chemistry became so genuine that even off-camera they treated each other like Neil and Dale, Martin composed and dry, and Candy warm and chaotic. The rental car lot was filmed during a real Chicago blizzard, and the weather was so bad that the crew had to build their own snow just to keep continuity. Ironically, much of the movie about airport delays was filmed in cities without snow at the time. And here's a fun hidden fact. The movie's theme music, that funky electronic beat, is actually called Back in Baby's Arms, sampled and remixed by composer Ira Newborn into a quirky motif that follows Dale Griffith like a musical punchline. Today, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles stands as a holiday staple thanks to the heart, humor, and perfect performances from Martin and Candy, the rare buddy comedy that sticks the landing with both laughs and tears. Whether you're rewatching it on Thanksgiving or catching a late-night cable rerun, it remains a road trip classic that reminds us all to be a little more like Dell. All right, with that down, we're going to roll right into what the critics said. This is where we look at the first 10 top critic reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Looking at the tomato meter, we've got a 93% by the critics, and the popcorn meter is at 87%. So this is a pretty beloved film. Right into what the critics said, Joe Pollock from St. Louis Post-Dispatch says, as recent variations of an age-old movie genre go, it is fairly good, but somehow you hope for more from Steve Martin and John Candy. Dwayne Burge from The Hollywood Reporter says mainstream audiences should readily identify with the series of tribulations and woes that befall the everyman Martin in this good-natured, albeit predictable comedy. Mark Lee from the Daily Telegraph in the UK says Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a very funny film. Gavin Bainbridge from Empire Magazine says a warm, mature offering from Hughes, with Martin's restraint a perfect counterpoint to Candy's enormous and enormously amusing fooling around. J.R. Jones from the Chicago Reader says pretty dispensable. Richard Schickel from Time Magazine says, it is, of course, always a pleasure to watch Martin's steam gauge face register his rising internal pressure and to witness his exquisitely expressed blow-offs, but Candy offers even more insinuating delights. Variety Staff from Variety Magazine says, man versus technology has been one of the staples of screen comedy since the earliest silent days, and Hughes makes the most of the format here, packing as many of the frustrations of modern life as he can into this calamitous travelogue of roadside America. Derek Adams from Time Out says, essentially, it's the star's keenly observed nuances of character that makes this comedy amiable enough. Harper Barnes from the St. Louis Dispatch, or St. Louis Post-Dispatch, says, as recent variations of an age-old movie genre go, it is fairly good, but somehow you hope for more from Steve Martin and John Candy. And then Janet Maslin from the New York Times says the film does have its scattered moments, but too often the audience has as much reason as Dell and Neil do to wonder where, if anywhere, they are going. All right, that is what the critics said. You know, reading some of that, I mean, this is a lot of these were entered at later points. So some of them probably came from the time that it came out and were then later entered into these databases online. So the dates that are on here aren't necessarily the dates that this person saw the film and gave a critique of it. They're just from when it was entered into here. And reading some of it, it made me realize that this movie has become more and more beloved. And I don't know, you know, like I at the time when it came out, it probably wasn't obviously like this kind of considered a classic, and just like Home Alone wasn't when it came out, although Home Alone was a smash hit in the movie theater. This movie seems to have like gained ground as time has gone on, and I think a lot of these people's critique of the film probably from the time it came out to now, I would assume would kind of change a little bit if they are like anyone else and this movie has grown on them or they've warmed up to it. But there's a lot of stuff in there that I would was kind of surprised to hear people say, to be honest with you. Moving on to first time or 50th. Was this a first watch or a nostalgic return, and how did that influence the viewing? This is a film that I used to watch on TV occasionally. It wasn't like necessarily a big staple in my house. It's become more of a film that I've watched as I've gotten older. I've become more familiar with as I gotten older, but I did used to watch it on TV occasionally as it would come on, and of course it was edited for TV, so the language was different, and it's not like that it's peppered with language. It's not like it's just ridiculous, you know, bad language through the whole thing. There's just like peppered moments in the film, but all that stuff was either edited out or overdubbed or whatever. The Steve Martin, you know, I don't know if they cut out that rental car scene or cut it in a way for television to make it. I don't know what you would do there. Probably some sort of, you know, lip sync overdub thing that with like ADR or whatever it's called, however they do that. But it does carry a little more weight in the theatrical version, that's for sure. So I've seen this, I don't know, a good probably 8 or 10 times, but it was never something that I saw a lot growing up. It was something that I have watched more in my older years. But it's a fun kind of Thanksgiving film to sit down and watch and make you laugh every year, kind of like some people sit down with Christmas Vacation or whatever for Christmas time. This one's kind of in that Thanksgiving era or Thanksgiving time period, kind of Thanksgiving film as they are trying to get home for Thanksgiving. Moving on to be continued. Would a sequel work for this film? And if there is a sequel, should there have been? I'll say about this one, like I've said about others, I don't think this particular film you could make necessarily a sequel of. I mean, you could decide like somehow for some reason, now that these guys are friends, we're going to send them on some other trip together for some reason. You could write a story about that if you really wanted to, if you really wanted to capitalize. I don't think they should. I think it would kind of take away from the original, like take away the, I guess, purity, if you will, of the original. But I could see another road trip for some reason or other between these two guys where it's the same kind of stuff again, except they're like friends now, so it makes it harder to deal with, or they just like flat out don't really care because they are friends, so they just say whatever's on their mind. But I would say if there was going to be a sequel to this, it would more than likely need to be just called Planes, Trains, and Automobiles 2, where we meet two other completely different people in a similar situation where there's new gags and new stuff that happens to him or whatever, but it's a completely different people in a completely different story that just happens to be the same idea. If there was going to be a sequel, or if there had ever been a sequel made, that, in my opinion, would be the way that I think a sequel for a film like this should have gone. I don't see a John Candy, Steve Martin sequel that should have been made. I don't get that from the end of this by any means. And even if they wanted to do it now, obviously Candy passed back in the 90s, which wouldn't be a possibility now. Anyway. All right, before we jump into the final segment, today's episode is brought to you by PrepStartsNow.com, your go-to spot for emergency and outdoor preparedness. If you're anything like me, you'd rather be prepared and not need it than need the essentials and not have them. From 72-hour emergency essentials to camping gear, car emergency essentials, multi-tools, first aid, and even home gardening supplies, as you start to grow some of your own food, they've got you covered for all of it, and the best part is, as a listener, you can use the promo code REWATCH to get a 15% site-wide discount, and you'll also be helping out the show as they give us a small reward for your business in the process. Head to PrepStartsNow.com/discount/REWATCH. That's PrepStartsNow.com/discount/REWATCH, or simply enter the code REWATCH at checkout and get prepared today. All right, now let's do a quick rundown of the film. I'm not going to go into super detail. We'll get more into detail stuff, I guess, later on, talking through the final verdict stuff. Sorry, my nose is a little runny. I can't help it. It's that time of year. You're just going to have to deal with it. First of all, it was my understanding, and I'll talk a little bit about that maybe when we get to story and plot, but it was my understanding that this was going to be a different film initially, and that as they were shooting, like this, what this film was about was just going to be a short segment of the film, and then they realized that while shooting it, like, oh no, this is the movie. Anyway, but the movie starts out in extremely uncomfortable. I mean, everything about the opening part of the film is uncomfortable, where the boss is like not saying anything. He keeps almost saying something and everybody's like hanging on to every word just to wait for something to come out of his mouth. But you catch from the beginning that Steve Martin's character is just sort of lets everything get to him, and he's cynical and just like irritated about everything. But all he wants to do is get home for Thanksgiving. And basically on his way to the airport, he has all this kind of trouble, trips over some luggage. He argues with this guy about a cab. He races, funny enough, Kevin Bacon. This may have been one of Kevin Bacon's earliest roles. He's not a major part of the film. He's just the cab guy that he races. But he races Kevin Bacon down the street, and Bacon's on one side, Steve Martin's on the other, and they're racing for a cab. Kevin Bacon ultimately gets the cab and then runs off, and then that's it. He's just in the first couple minutes of the film. But then he goes to get another cab. He tries to pay this other guy off to take the cab, which the other guy that he's trying to pay off is, I believe, the kind of sidekick dude in Die Hard with a Vengeance, that is supposed to be real tall and kind of his sidekick guy. Anyway, I think he's from Die Hard with a Vengeance, if I'm placing him properly. I didn't realize that. There's a whole bunch of familiar faces and things that I caught this time around that I probably knew were there but didn't pay as much attention to before watching this film. But before he can get in that car that he's trying to pay the guy for, somebody else takes the car, puts their stuff in the trunk, gets in the car, and the cab leaves. And when he chases it down, he realizes that it's John Candy's character who has stolen his cab that he's trying to get. And when he gets to the airport, he finds out that it was John Candy's. Not only did he take his cab, he tripped over his luggage trunk. So everything about the movie starts off with John Candy's character as Dell is doing nothing but slowing down and causing Steve Martin problems getting home, causing him issues with the plane, or on the plane. So he barely makes it to the airport. Then he's on the plane. They end up getting sit beside each other on the plane. He's just bugs him in every way possible. You know, like taking his shoes off on the plane, whirling his socks around, leaning over, sleeping on him. There's a guy that's sleeping on Steve Martin's right in this film, that is also So there's two movies that, if it's the same guy that I'm thinking of, and it probably is because it's John Hughes, and these other two films are John Hughes projects. So in Home Alone, the two elderly people that come up to Catherine O'Hara, and she's offering her jewelry to get their ticket home, their flight home, and he's like, she's got a lot. The old man says she's got a whole bunch of jewelry, a bunch of earrings at home, dangly ones. That guy is also the guy that reads from The Thing in Dennis the Menace. So in the movie Dennis the Menace, when Mr. Wilson his flower's about to bloom and he's getting this award or whatever, and there's an older lady and an older man that are reading this off, and they swap their eyeglasses, and he's wearing hers and she's wearing his. In that film, that's the same couple as well. So that same couple is in Dennis the Menace. They're also in Home Alone, and then that guy is sleeping on Steve Martin's right shoulder in the movie on the airplane. And those are all, it's all John Hughes was either producer or director of those other films too, and so it makes sense that he would bring this guy in, or he would be a part of this John Hughes film as well. But the plane ride, Steve Martin hates it. He's so annoyed, and ultimately when the plane gets to where they're going, he doesn't have anywhere to go. All the hotel rooms are booked up. He's afraid he's going to have to sleep on the floor of the airport, and so he gets offered by Dell to stay at the hotel with him, or or he was going to help him get a hotel room, but ultimately there's not a hotel room. So he has to stay with him. So there's this thing where, like, throughout the entire film, it's Steve Martin's kind of completely out of luck and ultimately keeps having to pair himself with Dell just to get along, just to get to the next place, just to get by. And Dell is doing nothing but being the most obnoxious, annoying person, from completely and totally soaking all the bath towels to spilling beer in the bed where he has to sleep, to snorting and snotting everywhere and trying to clear his throat while he's trying to sleep. And it becomes a whole big thing where they get into it, and it's this bickering back and forth where it's Steve Martin as Neil, and Dell, John Candy. It's Neil is constantly bugged by Dell, and then he's freaking out and flying off the handle, and then he's turning right around and kind of realizing, like, I'm shouldn't have done that. I've overreacted, and so there's just like a back and forth thing, and it is very reminiscent of, like, Due Date. Not reminiscent necessarily in that Due Date came much after, but the whole entire concept of the movie Due Date, where they're trying to get somewhere, and it's the dude that's helping you get somewhere is also causing you all the problems, keeping you from getting there. That's kind of what this is. From getting a hotel room together to then having to take a train together, and the train breaks down, and then I think they take a bus to get together, and then something goes wrong with the bus situation. He tries to rent a rental car, and there's that whole scene with the lady at the rental place because they drop him off, and Neil's rental car is not in the spot, so there's no car there. So he gets dropped off by the bus. They part ways, Dell and Neil, thinking, okay, it's all done. But then Neil gets to the place where his rental car is supposed to be. He dropped off by the bus, and the rental car is not there. It's just an empty parking lot. So he freaks out, walks back to the airport, walks across the runway, and gets back. And that's when that, like, iconic, back and forth with the lady at the rental car counter happens, which she's, been in a ton of other stuff as well. But ultimately, he ends up almost getting hit after freaking out on this guy, knocked out into the road. Dell almost hits him because Dell now has a rental car. And so they're both in Dell's rental car, and they're going along, and they end up having to stay at a hotel. And after they leave the hotel and back into it, because Dell has now backed into the hotel, I think before they got to the hotel, their car caught fire. He realized that Dell took his credit card and used it on the rental car. It's just a whole mess, the entire film. So you've got this whole entire film of Steve Martin is trying to just get home for Thanksgiving to his family. And the one guy that keeps kind of helping him take steps getting there is also the one guy that keeps sort of screwing everything up for him along the way. It's this give and take the whole time, and a major tension that the audience feels the whole time until you get to the very end and they finally get where they're going. And Dell's been talking about his wife this whole time, and Neil realizes that Dell, his wife, wasn't around anymore. That he had died, and Dell doesn't have any, or she had died, and Dell doesn't have anywhere to go or any family to spend the holiday with. So Neil goes back to the train station, and he gets Dell, and he takes him back to his house, and they go and walk in, and Neil gets to see all of his family and hug his wife, and he introduces the family to Dell, and then the camera, cuts to John Candy, and he gives a particular John Candy smile, which is like sort of he's content, he's happy to see Neil be home with his family. But he's also, it's like in the back of his mind, the smile is communicating that like he's happy for him. He's a little heartbroken for himself, but he's also appreciative of like being taken in. So, and then there's a freeze frame, and that's how the movie ends. So it's just a film of this give and take, back and forth, problem solved, but the problem solver is causing the problems to begin with. And it keeps you in this tension the whole time with the comedy and all that stuff. But that is essentially a recap of the film, or very bad recap that's probably all jumbled and doesn't make any sense to anybody who hasn't seen the film. But with that down, we're moving right on into now the final verdict. This is where we put the film to the test across 10 categories, scored on a scale from 1 to 5, and the scale looks like this. 1 is poor, 2 is weak, 3 is fair, 4 is good, 5 is excellent. And then the verdict scale, after these are all added up, all 10 categories added up from 1 to 5, a score from 10 to 20 is a return, absolutely, no questions asked. A score from 20 to 30 is return worthy, but maybe nostalgia will kind of pull us along if we don't necessarily want to consider it a return. A score from 30 to 40 is a leans rewatch, but it's in that debatable category where a lot of people really like it, but a lot of people really don't, so it's a little debatable. And then 40 to 50 is a certified rewatchable film, no questions asked, or no arguments to be made about it. Now, I will say, obviously, these are my personal scores for this, so when I say no argument can be made about it, that means for me. Like, this is how I feel about the film. It's not how you have to feel about the film. But these are my scores, how I feel about the film, and that's not really going to change probably because at this point, with this film, I don't see any of that changing. But moving right into story and plot. Is the narrative compelling and coherent? Does it still hold up on a rewatch? I think that this is, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like movies overall. Up to this point, obviously there have been movies where you have like the one guy that's really annoying and bugging person and causing problems the whole film. I mean, think back to Jerry Lewis stuff where he's constantly fumbling over himself and being an idiot and causing issues and causing problems and the slapstick kind of stuff. But I'm trying to think of like a film that is like a traveling buddy comedy kind of film that is like this that came out before this. I'm sure there's one, and I'm sure I could remember if I really, really tried, but nothing's coming to mind. I think this is one of the more prominent, I suppose, and more standout kind of travel comedy situations where you got your straight-laced dude and your kind of dude that has no self-awareness really, and one can't stand the other, and that whole situation. This is the first one like this that I can think of that was written this way and performed this way. So while Due Date, like I was talking about earlier, did come later, Due Date was a a lot of pulling from this or pulling the idea from this, even though the story was different. It was different situations. It was still very much this movie done in a different way. So for story and plot, I thought that it was obviously it's a compelling narrative. It is coherent in my opinion. I think it all makes sense. Now some people might get tired of following it along. Like some people might have the mentality of I'm tired of seeing things not work out. Really, again, you're going to put them in another situation. Can you not just let them go? Like that's the whole point of the movie. So some people would watch this. I know some people like this in my family that I've watched movies with my entire life who would definitely be like, come on, man, just stop having them have trouble. Just, can you not, like, another thing's going to happen to them now? You're not just going to let it, like, so I know people like that, and I can see people that would be that way, but to me, this movie makes sense. It's funny. I'm waiting every time on the next thing to happen. I do think it still holds up on a rewatch. It's a very funny film. It's a John Hughes script. The dude could write, like, a film. He can write a story and write, particularly, put a script together for a film that has so much of all the things that make you feel the really heartfelt stuff, but the comedy and the irritation, and like there's so much of that in so much of his stuff, and that's what has made John Hughes a beloved filmmaker and writer. I give the story and plot because, again, this is my score. There's some nostalgia that kicks in with this. I'm trying to be as true as I can about it, or true to what these say. And I have drugged this category out for a while, but I'm trying to be as true as I can to what the categories are and what they say, and judging them according to that, not my feelings for the overall film. But I think the story and plot is great, and I would not want to drop it to a 4 and put it at good. And I think that if 5 is excellent and is what makes the highlight of the film, I mean, I think the story and the actors are the highlight of the film. So the stories and the characters are clearly the highlight of the film. And so I give story and plot a 5 out of 5. Moving on to characters and performances, are the characters memorable and well acted, or forgettable and flat? Clearly, the characters are memorable and well acted. Steve Martin and John Candy, two absolute icons in film, icons in comedy. There's just, there's never going to be another Steve Martin. There's never going to be, these guys of that era. There's never going to be another Steve Martin, never another John Candy, never another Martin Short, never another, Eugene Levy. All these guys that are, Rick Moranis, the guys from like that era, that group, that you're not going to see any more of them ever again. Or not such a generation that has that much comedic talent and have the ability to seriously act too, or have really heartfelt moments, but while also being geniuses of comedy. So I think, obviously my nose is itches. I'm sorry. Are the characters memorable and well acted? Absolutely. And they're not forgettable and flat at all. There's a lot of side characters too in this film that kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily make the film, but are like really enjoyable. I don't know where I know him from, but the guy they get in the truck with that's snorting and spitting dip, and there's so much good stuff. The moment where that guy he goes to spit, and it's like he intentionally spits it down his chin, and then he wipes his chin and sticks his hand out to shake Steve Martin's hand. It's like all this stuff is so well written and well done, and the look on his face when he's shaking his hand, it's like there's so much good to this. But anyway, for characters and performances, I'm giving this a 5 out of 5 too, because it is iconic and classic. Both of their, your main characters' performances, and even some stuff, even some side characters and things are iconic in the scene that they're, like the lady at the the counter at the rental car place. They're iconic in their involvement in the scene, not necessarily throughout the whole movie. Moving on to pacing and entertainment value. Were you entertained the whole time? Did the movie keep your attention? Does it feel too slow, too rushed, or just right? I was entertained the whole time. The movie did keep my attention. It does not feel too slow or too rushed. I think it is just right, pacing and entertainment value. There, like I said, there's so much comedy in this that's like the right kind of comedy. It's there's so much entertainment in this, and it's not just simply what comes out of somebody's mouth or simply someone's physical reaction to something. It's just like such a great combination of the script narrative. It's the situation that they're put in on top of the physical reactionary comedy, on top of the things that come out of their mouths. So it's just such a funny and entertaining film, from my opinion. So pacing and entertainment value, I am giving a 4.5 out of 5, putting it right between good and excellent. Moving on to dialogue and quotability. Are there iconic or memorable lines? Do people still quote it? Does the dialogue feel natural and cringy? I'm laughing because as I'm thinking about the dialogue, my brain immediately goes to the scene where they're riding in the back of that guy's truck, and he asks him what the temperature is, and he goes, I think 1. He doesn't say like 1 degree or anything like that. He just says something. I think he says like, what do you think the temperature is, or how cold do you think it is, or something, and John Candy just says, I think 1. But yeah, there's absolutely iconic and memorable lines in this thing. The whole entire rental car situation is iconic, and I'm not going to repeat any of that. But the pillows line, where's your hand? It's between 2 pillows. Those aren't pillows. That stuff's hilarious. The I like me, the delivery from John Candy where he goes through the whole thing about like, my wife likes me, I like me. I mean, there's literally a John Candy documentary that just came out called I Like Me, and it's from this movie. But there's a ton of quotable, memorable, iconic, bits of dialogue and quotable lines from this film. I would say, yeah, people do still quote it at the right time. There's times people aren't just running around saying random stuff from this film necessarily, but I think definitely it's quotable and it still gets quoted. The dialogue, I don't think feels cringy. I think it feels pretty natural, and I think like especially the irritation stuff, like the things that I may not would say the things that come out of Steve Martin's mouth in the movie to someone else, but I would probably be heavily struggling not to be feeling and thinking the same things that he was feeling and thinking in the situations that he was put in, for sure. But dialogue and quotability, there's such great delivery. These guys fall into these characters just perfectly. And so I am giving dialogue and quotability a 4 out of 5 and putting it at, actually, you know what? Nope. I'm not doing that. I'm going to go 4.5 out of 5. I'm bumping it up in real time here. Moving on to, dialogue and quotability, 4.5 out of 5. Moving on to soundtrack and score. Does the music enhance the film or date it? Does it elevate the emotional tone of the film or feel out of place? Is it iconic or generic? So, the music in this film definitely dates the film. Puts it in the 80s. A lot of gated snare stuff, a lot of rototoms with heavy reverb, regular toms with heavy reverb, a lot of synth stuff that's very 80s sounding. That kind of stuff is not it didn't continue in popularity in film in later stuff unless it was a film that was like calling back to that era or being set in that era and particularly used for that to set the time period for something. But that style of music did not carry on really after the 80s in film, and so it definitely dates the film. I don't think that it messes the film up, but it definitely dates it. So there's that. Does it elevate the emotional tone of the film? The score, those moments where that stuff is used, it definitely evokes something. It definitely does something to what you're feeling about what's happening. It doesn't feel out of place. It just feels dated. I don't know that it's iconic, but I don't know that I would put it at generic either. I'm like kind of in between this feeling about it, but because of everything that I just said, it is very 80s. It's not iconic, but it's not generic. It just feels like it belongs in that era when this movie was made, and it kind of time capsules this while still having enough, evoking enough, or moving you to feel enough about things that it's still relatable, even though it's very 80s in nature. Because of that, I gave soundtrack and score a 3.9 out of 5. So just like, for whatever reason, I'm just going to put it right under a 4 and put it at the tippy top of fair. Moving on to cinematography and visual style. Is it visually engaging or stylish, regardless of effects budget or genre? Do the camera work and effects still impress, or do they look dated or clunky? I will say this, that I tried to pay as much attention as I could to this, and I love the way that John Hughes uses a particular reveal style, and it is not it's like a moving, whatever you want to call it. It's like a dolly reveal or a dolly slide reveal. I don't know. It has to be on a dolly. It's not happening on a swivel. So there's no like anchored access point where it's swiveling. It looks like a steady, sideways dolly movement, if that makes sense. But there's a lot of those, or from bottom up. But the way that he does these reveals in this movie, I can really appreciate, because it's the whole time you're waiting for like the next shoe to drop or what's the next bad thing that's going to happen. And when you cut to a new scene or you cut to a new moment, and he starts in this place where like what you're going to see hasn't fully been revealed, and we're slowly going to go there, and it's like builds up this tension in time, like the guy that picks them up in the truck, and you see him basically from like the knees down, and it slowly pans up until you see his face and his, big dip, or, chewing tobacco chaw on his mouth with spit coming out, and or the pan in where they're in the hotel room, and they've had basically he's invited Dale back in from being in the car after the car caught on fire, and basically he was not going to let him in, and he paid for his own room with some cash and his watch. And then he finally feels bad about him, and he invites him in. And I believe that's the moment when like it cuts next to a bunch of like candy and chip bags and all this kind of stuff that you're seeing on the bed and on the nightstand, and it starts to pan over to the bed slowly, slide sideways, sliding over, revealing, and you're feeling like, is this going to reveal a moment of Neil being irritated with Dale, or is this opening itself up and revealing a moment of them sitting around talking and being okay with each other? There's a lot of those particular, the choice to use that in this film, I think, like goes really well with the tension building and what's coming next kind of thing. But outside of that, or even, I don't know, there's just a lot of like really interesting choices, stuff that I really caught and really liked. For example, there is a establishing shot where they're establishing like, hey, they're at the hotel, the original hotel that Dell got, that Neil was staying in the room with him for, and they could have shot the establishing shot just from like outside the hotel and like, okay, here you are, you're at this hotel from the highway or whatever. But he chose to go like across the highway, across a field, into like a pig pen. So the morning that he is establishing the next morning that it's daylight again, it's the next morning, that establishing shot is from the perspective of a pig pen, and all these pigs squeaking and walking around in the mud, seeing the hotel way off in a distance. And like, it's a nod in that moment to basically the pig pen that Neil feels like he's in, because all the towels were left in the floor, soaking wet. He had to dry himself off with a little hand towel or wash rag. He gets in there the next morning to brush his teeth, and Dell's socks are in the sink, and so he goes to get, it cuts from that establishing shot, it cuts to him getting up the next morning, going in there, drying his face off, or wetting his face and drying his face off, but he wets his face with the water from the sink that has socks soaking in it. And then he's like, oh, gross. And then he grabs a towel to dry his face off and realizes the towel that he grabs is Dell's underwear. So like the foreshadowing, the immediate foreshadowing of putting you in this pig pen, viewing the hotel, having them wake up, and he goes into the bathroom and he puts dirty water on his face and he dries his face off with underwear. Like, those particular decisions are just awesome to me and very creative and very thoughtful. So I think, like, yes, it's very visually engaging. There's a particular, I don't know about style necessarily, unless you're talking about the use of certain movements as style. But I wouldn't say like a visual style. Like, there's not a particular coloring or I don't think he used any of those major Anyway, I don't know that it's super stylish. While there is a particular John Hughes decision making about things. But I think there's a lot of camera work that I really like, and some shots and angles that I really like. And I don't think any of it looks dated or clunky. So for cinematography and visual style, I'm giving it a 4. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Yeah, we're just going to hang it at a 4 out of 5. Moving on to originality and creativity. Does the film feel fresh and inspired, or like something you've seen 100 times? Was the film groundbreaking or formulaic? Does it bring something unique? Here's where I was talking about a while ago. I don't know that this film was the first of its kind, or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, it's not the first of its kind in the premise of the film, but was it the first of its kind to have that level of to have the idea of like traveling together and the positions that they keep putting himself, being put in, and the comedy, but with the irritation, with also the heart of the film. Like, does something like that exist before this? I'm not really sure. I don't know. I'm not a library of film in my mind, and I don't know enough, obviously, to be able to say, oh yeah, this and this and this and this and this are like this. So to me, this has some originality in it, at least from the approach to maybe a already used premise. But this approach, I think, was like an original approach, or the ideas and things that the situations that they put them in, and the choices in the story that they chose to make, I think, are clearly of an original mind and very thoughtful and creative. So I think it does feel inspired. I think it feels, I would say some people didn't think so, but like for me, I think, I don't think Hughes does anything that's just trying to pick off of something else or completely copy something else necessarily. He's always an original and creative dude, even if it's not, even if it's a story that's been told already. It's like he does his own thing with it and brings something unique to it. So, does it feel fresh and inspired in a way? Is it like something you've seen 100 times? Not necessarily. I can't name a ton of movies that are this movie, while at the same time I can name a few, but it feels like a lot of them pull from this. Was it groundbreaking or formulaic? No. Not groundbreaking, but not formulaic, I don't really think. Does it bring something unique? I think there's a unique nature to this, especially when given the actors who are in it, your main characters, what they brought to it, what Hughes brought to it. Anyway, so for originality and creativity, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5. Maybe you disagree, but that's where I'm putting it. Number 8, theme and message. Is there a deeper takeaway, and does it explore ideas that resonate today? Yeah. I mean, clearly there's a larger overarching message of you can't always expect your plans to go like they're going to go, and getting upset and irritated about it along the way does not help anything at all. It doesn't help you, and it doesn't help anybody trying to help you out or anything. So there's that. Like, that's a very clear, obvious message. There's also the idea and message of themes of, you don't know what's going on with somebody else. So even while somebody else might be causing you some trouble, you don't know what they're going through. And just like Neil didn't know what Dell was going through. Am I getting... Yeah. So he didn't know what he was going through. So there's that. His wife had died. He was going to be alone for the holidays. He's basically by himself. Pretty lonely dude, and a lot of personal struggles. And then the idea that, the theme or the message of like actually befriending someone who maybe does irritate you a little bit, but they need a friend, and it's a matter of like you being like humbling yourself and considering someone else before yourself, and going like, this person is bugging me and irritating me, but like, let me be as patient as I can with somebody. Let me be as understanding as I can with somebody. There's a lot to be said about the things that ultimately, at the end of this movie, that you feel, which is you're irritated throughout the whole movie, but when it's all said and done and you look back, it's like, hey, like I said, you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know anything about anything. You just got to roll with the punches and have a good attitude about it and do the best you can. You don't know what someone else is going through, and don't freak out on people who may seem like they're trying to cause you a hard time, or maybe trying to do things or not thinking. They have stuff going on too, and you got to realize that and consider that. And then, like I said, again, be a friend to people that may not have friends, and people that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily be friends with or even want to be friends with. You gotta have a heart for folks. So there's all that. I feel like I could chit chat about that for a long time, and I'm trying not to just ramble and go places that are completely offshoots that are not related to this necessarily. And so if that felt a little jumbled up, I apologize. But anyway, I give theme and message, because of all that, a 4 out of 5. Moving on to cringe factor. Any jokes, effects, or moments that haven't aged well or were always bad. Moments that make you wince now. Campy moments, cheesy moments, bad effects, outdated jokes that aren't funny, etc. Okay, so there's a couple moments in this movie that are fine, because I know they're not meant to be literal, but I still have to acknowledge them. So there's the moment when he's driving the wrong way down the highway after getting both of his arms stuck. One arm stuck on the seatbelt thing or whatever on the right, and the other arm stuck on the doorknob, and he can't move either arm. He's trying to get out of his jacket. He just threw his cigarette in the back, and it is, beginning to burn the seat, and which leads to the fire. But he ends up also driving the wrong way down the highway after this whole spin out deal that happened, and they go through two big rigs. They're two 18-wheelers are coming at them, and they go right between both of them going the wrong way on the highway. And in that moment, while they're both freaking out, kind of like the Home Alone moment where Marv turns into an actual skeleton for a second when he's getting shocked, which doesn't really happen. It's just that's how he feels kind of thing more. It's like a visual nod to what's not reality but what is felt in the moment, which is the same in this, where both of these guys turn to skeletons in the car. They're just actual skeletons for a moment, but it's like that's how freaked out, scared they are at the moment, like and kind of like when you scare people and they're pale as a ghost, they say, or whatever. But then there's also the moment where it's happening. They turn to skeletons for just a second, but then it shows the perspective of Steve Martin as Neil looking at John Candy, and it's the feeling that he has of like, this guy's the absolute devil and is doing nothing but causing me absolute just crazy nonsense stuff and putting my life in danger and all. So he looks over, and John Candy is in like an actual like devil suit with horns and stuff, and he's lit up in all red, and he's laughing kind of like with an evil laugh. And it's for like a quick split second, the skeletons and the devil thing, and then they're like back to normal. Then they have the moment of like pulling their fingernails out of that were like stuck in the dash, that have made indentions in the dash. They've pulled them out, and there's some things that are funny and kind of go a little far and aren't necessarily meant to be literal, but they show you with your own eyes. So it's like you can take them literal if you want, but they're obviously not meant to be literal. But it makes it there's this level of like cringe in that. I'm not saying it's even bad cringe. We're just going with overall cringe here, but I'm not saying it's bad cringe. I think that like makes the movie funnier, and I enjoy and appreciate those parts. But if I'm going with the cringe factor here, there's like moments like that take this out of being just a regular old, completely and totally grounded movie to like leaving that for just a second. And because of that, I'm giving cringe factor a 3.9 out of 5, just barely below good. Matter of fact, no, I'm gonna take that back. We're going with a 4. I'm gonna go with a 4. It's just that moment that causes me that. There's also a level of, actually no, we're going back to 3.9, and you know why? It's because all the stuff that they go through, I can appreciate it and it's funny, but like nobody is actually going to go through all of this crap in a situation like this. It's funny to put it in a movie, and that's fine and dandy. But I'm leaving this at a 3.9 because as funny as all this is, it's amped up reality. And then it's also not reality. It's metaphoric or whatever you want to call it. What those other moments where there's skeletons and he's looking like the devil and all that. It's showing what they're feeling and then amping up reality. So this is because of that, I'm going to leave this at a 3.9 out of 5. So cringe factor gets a 3.9 out of 5 on the cringe factor. And then moving on to nostalgia and rewatchability. Does it hold up to your memory of it? Does it still matter today? Is it timeless or has it aged poorly? Does a rewatch ruin the magic, and would you honestly watch it again? It definitely holds up to my memory. I've always enjoyed this movie. I think I enjoyed it this time around more than I have the last several times I watched it. I watched it with a little different eyes, with a little different mindset as I watched it for this. I caught some things I never caught before. I appreciated those things because I'd never seen them before, never noticed them before, the little things. So, yeah, it definitely held up. I think it does matter today. I think this is a comedy that is, I would say, this is a timeless comedy. It's a timeless film, I do think. It's two iconic actors in a iconic comedy film that has done nothing but become more popular over the years. Don't think it's aged poorly by any means, and a rewatch doesn't ruin the magic. It just made me appreciate it even more. And would you honestly watch it again? Absolutely. And so I initially put, because of all that, I was fixing to say something different and change my score, but I'm not going to do that. Just leaving this where it is. Because of all that, I think I feel very much nostalgic about it, and I think it's a very rewatchable film. So for nostalgia and rewatchability, I'm giving it a 4.5 out of 5. All right, so now let's run down through what our score is. For story and plot, I got a 5 out of 5. For characters and performance, I gave a 5 out of 5. For pacing and entertainment value, I gave a 4.5 out of 5. For dialogue and quotability, I gave a 4.5 out of 5. For soundtrack and score, I gave a 3.9 out of 5. For cinematography and visual style, I gave a 4 out of 5. For originality and creativity, I gave a 4 out of 5. Theme and message got a 4 out of 5. Cringe factor got a 3.9 out of 5. Nostalgia and rewatchability got a 4.5 out of 5. And that makes the total 43.3, putting this one squarely in the, I don't know about squarely necessarily, but it definitely puts it up into the certified rewatchable between 40 and 50. And I do think this is absolutely a certified rewatchable film. And the fact that you got a 93% on the tomato meter and an 87% on the popcorn meter, I say would make this definitely a rewatchable film. I am sure that there are people that would like to debate that, and that's fine. You can have your own score, but my score puts it right where I think it belongs, at certified rewatchable. All right. That is one of maybe two Thanksgiving films. It's not necessarily sitting at a Thanksgiving meal, but this is a about getting home for Thanksgiving movie. So next week, I'm thinking about doing Son-in-Law because they are she takes a trip home for Thanksgiving in Son-in-Law. So I'm thinking about doing Son-in-Law next week. We'll see. More than likely, if you want to come back for that one. But 43.3 out of 3. 43.3 out of 50, rather. Certified rewatchable for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Thank you for hanging on to the end here. If you would like to comment and let me know what you think, if you're watching YouTube, you can do that below in the comments section. Let me know how you feel about this one, or if you came to a different conclusion than I did. If you would like to comment and you're listening on the audio only on any of the podcasting platforms, you can go to Instagram and go to Rewatch or Return on there and go to the post related to this episode and let me know underneath there in the comments what you thought or how you felt. If you like this podcast, if you are enjoying it and you know someone who might enjoy it and doesn't know about it, it would be awesome if you shared it, or if you would just like to share it in general and go, hey, I like this thing, and if y'all want to check it out. That'd be cool too. Don't feel like you have to do that. I'm not necessarily saying that it's a need, but it is something that I would appreciate, and I'm sure there's tons of people, obviously, that don't know anything about this. Because it is one of many, but I would appreciate any sharing or pointing in this direction, because it's always helpful for the algorithms and such, and any new folks and ears that come around and enjoy themselves being a part of what I am enjoying doing would be very cool and welcome. With all that said, that is going to be the end of this episode, and I will see you next week.